I asked Tim to give a long explanation and introduction. He has a sheet of paper, I think.
Would have been here till tomorrow.
But it's irrelevant, basically. So I think what I'm interested in talking about is something that I think is occurring in Canada and internationally, what's happening in post-secondary education, and then a little response in terms of railroads. I spent most of my career as a professor at the University of Calgary and in various assignments, but my degree is actually from Syracuse University in public administration, but I decided that I should teach in a business school and help business students understand more social responsibility and ethics rather than teach political science students how to succeed in government. So I've spent most of my career in a business school. From the University of Calgary, then I went to be vice president of the University of Regina and was there for 5 years before going to Royal Roads. I was aware of Royal Roads because I was in Calgary when it was formed. And I thought it was interesting because this idea of having a university that's applied and connected to organizations and to business and to industry, and saw its role as having that connection as being interesting, and wondered to see whether it would succeed. And after 13 years, then decided that the initial kind of test worked out. If you're aware, in British Columbia, there was another university created at the same time as Royal Roads. It was called the Tech University of BC. So Royal Roads was the social science and applied master's program oriented university, and Tech BC was the science, engineering, and computer information systems type university. It's no longer around. It got absorbed by SFU and UBC, so it didn't succeed, but Royal Roads did. And I think for me then the interest is, so where does that go and where are we? And so I'm gonna start with that. And then I'm much better if you ask me questions, and I learned from Tim, so I'll stop at some point and see if there are any questions, and hopefully my machine won't crash during the period of time.
New ones.
But, you know, we've got support if it needs to happen, right? There's some interesting things happening in post-secondary education in Canada today and worldwide. There is a challenge in terms of the relevancy and value of education. Some of you are interested in the MBA program, and Henry Mintzberg at McGill has been one of the largest critics or strongest critics about the value of typical MBA programs and its lack of connection to real-world practice. That we've been preparing technocrats who understand components but can't really make significant informed decisions. University, undergraduate education, liberal arts education. What's the value if you can't get a job when you have a BA degree? Should we be doing this? What does it mean? In Ontario, this kind of sense of or interest now in differentiation and consolidation of research-intensive universities as opposed to primarily undergraduate universities. So there's a number of things happening with respect to what's happening in the field, and I think it's an opportunity and it's also a challenge. The point that I would make here is that Royal Roads University success serves as a best-in-class example of demand-driven education. And I would argue, having been started out as an undergraduate at the University of Calgary, the year after, it had changed its name from the University of Alberta in Calgary. So it was a branch of the University of Alberta, became its own university, and then started small and evolved over time and became now a world-class institution with a medical school and all of the whistles and stops that a full research-intensive university is now in Canada. So I saw that evolution. I remember as a professor having gone back there after my degree and having to defend that University of Calgary had a Master's of Management Studies, not an MBA, because the University of Alberta had an MBA and there shouldn't be duplication of degrees. So we had to make a case why we had a separate degree. That degree lasted for 2 years, and then we gave a chance to everybody to change the name to an MBA. Everybody did. But that kind of sense that somehow the university starts small and then evolve and then get larger. Then I went to the University of Regina, which is the second university in Saskatchewan. In that instance, there's clearly a University of Saskatchewan, a major provincial university, and a much smaller University of Regina, but both of those institutions spend most of their time looking at each other and worrying about who got more resources and what portion of resources that they got. It's kind of like those of you that perhaps have children know the sense of kind of sibling rivalry. My two daughters usually at Christmas spent most of their time looking at what the other ones got rather than what they got, right? How do we compare with what? That kind of sense is what I understand from universities. So I understand how small universities become large universities, and that career path for universities is pretty common. Royal Roads didn't get created that way, and so I've suggested that you know, designing a university is like asking the inmates to design the institution. We know how it should be because we've all been there. But Royal Roads ended up being an institution designed by people in the community, government and industry, and has tried to be responsive in that way. All right, some things about what's happening in BC. It's a evolving educational market with international students and Aboriginal students. What happened in the last 5 years in British Columbia is that 7 new universities were created. That many of these were colleges that became university colleges that now became full-fledged universities. So Thompson Rivers University, an established university in Kamloops, a regional university that has a college. It has the supposedly the best meat packing and meat cutting program in British Columbia, as well as master's degrees in business and other areas. It's a full range of college and university programs. The University of Fraser Valley also started as a college and became that. Vancouver Island University used to be Malaspina University College. Kwantlen Polytech is still 85% a college and 15% a university. Emily Carr, a specialty university, much like Royal Roads is a specialty university, and the University of British Columbia in Okanagan. So to give a sense, what happened in British Columbia happened fairly quickly in an attempt to create different kinds of options for universities in British Columbia. In Ontario, what's happening now is that there's similar kinds of moves in terms of consolidation of colleges and universities and research-intensive universities. All right. So why would I suggest that Royal Roads has a different approach to university education, and why is it a solution as opposed to part of the problem? If I was to predict what was common in most institutions these days, universities and colleges, they're characterized by what we call a structural deficit. And structural deficit is based on the fact that in spite of increased and in many cases record enrollments, government funding has been frozen, and tuitions are in many cases frozen. They are in British Columbia, for example. That in spite of having more and more students, the universities are in debt. And in other words, their requirements for funding from government outweigh their ability to generate their own revenue, so that they're to the point in which they're full of students, but they can't pay their bills. The revenue that they get from students is a much smaller portion than that which they expect from government. So the fact that they increase their numbers doesn't place them into a surplus position. And if you're an organization and if you're producing more products and losing money while you do that, what happens to you? You close. So the structural deficit is what's facing many institutions. And that deficit is further heightened, if you like, by problems such as pensions. And what happened in the economic downturn was the loss of portfolio for universities and the implications that that had on pensions. So very few institutions are profitable in terms of returns. Some are because they have good endowments. Some are because they rely on international students. But increasingly, the number of institutions that actually are viable is declining. What's happening in the UK and Europe is, as a result of the changing demographics and the economic downturn, is the consolidation of institutions. So those of you who would be familiar with what's happened in the UK, there was a proliferation of institutions in the 70s and 80s, polytechnical universities and creations of new institutions. Those now are starting to collapse, and there will be a consolidation of institutions, and that's what's happening in Europe. So a consolidation and in some cases going out of business. In other cases, it's increased differentiation. I talked about Thompson Rivers being an example of a post-secondary institution in Kamloops, a northern area, a growing area of British Columbia, but being able to provide all education from trades all the way through to master's level. Emily Carr being an example of a fine arts program, a specialty program for the university. Royal Roads being a specialty institution, primarily 65% of our students are graduate students, and we were designed and formed in that way. Colleges increasingly in British Columbia have the capacity to offer degrees. In Ontario, a lot of pressure on the part of colleges to get that degree granting possibility. Governments coming back and saying, do we need a research agenda on all of the topics with every institution, or should there be some consolidation and some operational synergies? So how are universities cooperating? What kinds of programs are they doing? In one of the clear areas that we're already starting to do some work is cooperating with respect to internationalization. There was a group of 15 university presidents that went to India in November of this year from Canada, from members of AUCC, and part of that intent was offshore, we can be a lot more collaborative and use each other's resources and share contacts that we have and people that we've defined as agents easier in that kind of sense, and governments are happy about that. And I'll come back to the comment by Gwyn Morgan, who just happens to live up the island from Royal Roads University and periodically fires off salvos in the Globe and Mail about his view of universities. Just an interesting, and again, I'm using BC because I'd hate to come to Ontario and tell you what it was like here. But this graph was presented by the Deputy Minister of Finance in British Columbia at Royal Roads in February of this year. And he said, this is where I'm looking at, he was trying to get our attention, and he did. He was nice, he said, even if education stays relatively same, between around 24, 26% of provincial revenues. So it's flat, no more money, but no less. The health budget's going to eat us up anyway. And everything else, transportation, everything else that the province does, eventually, by the year 2030, won't have any money left. It's a sobering kind of recognition that if we look at this, the interesting thing is, since the change of government, the Deputy Minister of Finance who presented this is now the Deputy Minister of Health, who's going to have to manage this curve. That's the reality in terms of where we're at in terms of government. All right. Railroads, a unique institution established by government to do a special purpose. So it's legislated, it has its own act to offer certificate, diploma, and degree programs in solely the applied and professional fields. Applications of knowledge, link with industry. And that theme, as Tim talked to you earlier, the theme of kind of relevancy of education and using your workplace as kind of the context to bring into the classroom, and the educational experience in the classroom is designed to use the work experience as the laboratory. So what works? What kind of communication systems do you have there? What are the environmental policies in your organization? What are the business practices here? And so the laboratory, as much as possible, becomes the workplace. And in the end, as Tim said about the MBA program, you come back with a project or a proposal. What's a master's, what is it called? The
thesis or research paper?
Yeah.
For the MBA, it's an organizational management project.
The organizational management project is an attempt to go back to the organization and make a difference. So to take your knowledge and apply it. That kind of linking between, you know, what you come into the education with, what you spend most of your time in the classroom doing, and what you do at the end is really important. When I was going to university, I can assure you that working and graduate work were considered not very positively. The only acceptable work as a graduate, as a doctoral student, was as someone's teaching assistant or a research assistant. But if you're working, professors didn't want to hear about it because it meant that you weren't really serious about your education. Royal Roads is saying that's opposite. That's the context that you bring. Why don't we make the education relevant to what you work, make sense of the world that you're in, and give you something you can take back into the workplace as a result of that experience? All right, so that kind of application, you know, what is that? Is that a castle or is that a university? As my grandson said when he saw it, turned to his dad and said, you know, Dad, that's a real castle. Now, you know, Tim didn't say that XMen was filmed there, did you? Did he? Yeah. They went flying through that front window there. That was part of it. I'm still looking for the legacy of XMen. We're trying to get them to come back because every time they do, we change our carpets, and they pay for that. So, okay. A second thing, in terms of why we were created in terms of an institution, was we were given a unique organizational governance structure, a unicameral governance structure. There are only two other universities in Canada with that. One happens to be the University of Toronto. But by and large, most institutions are created with an academic senate, which is supreme in all matters academic, and a board of governors, which is supreme in all matters of business operation. And that creates a natural tension, as you can well imagine, because if you argue that the rationale should strictly be on an academic basis, not on a financial basis, then what are the implications of the institution for doing that? So there was a deliberate attempt to create a university that combined those processes, at the same time protect academic integrity and decision making, but also align them so that they're done together. All right. So coming from that unilateral or unicameral governance system is an attempt to be able to make decisions fairly quickly, fairly strategically, nimbly, hopefully, that we can respond to the opportunities and react to them that's there. So one of the requirements of the legislation was that Royal Roads deliberately serve the needs of the labor market development of British Columbia and Canada. And that in an academic legislation is quite unique. So we have to consider how are we being supportive to what work is trying to do, and how can we facilitate that. That's a different model than saying that we are here because we deserve to be here and we're saving the world or educating the world. They're very great institutions, not the least of which are two that I know of in this city that do a great job doing that. Three, if I walk around some places. The point is that there are great institutions who do very traditional kinds of university education, but there also needs to be other kinds of institutions that can be responsive. And it's not exclusivity, it's complementarity is what I'm trying to get. So we have a responsibility to be responsive to labor market development, to be flexible, to be responsive to industry. We have one of our interesting new programs is the Masters of Disaster and Emergency Management. Most university programs, new programs, come from within. Faculty members are hired because they have expertise in that area, or they go to a conference and discover the new program, the new ideas are these, and they design programs around them. In other words, most academic programming is supply driven. It's what you have, it's the faculty you have, the interest you have, and you reach out. Royal Roads deliberately is demand driven. We had no one who had any expertise on faculty in disaster emergency management when we started the Disaster Emergency Master's Program. We were asked by government and industry to do that. It was an applied, practical program that they believed that we could develop quickly and appropriately. And we did. And we hired people in our model who had the expertise to do that. That's just an example of being demand-driven rather than supply-driven. And I think one of the things, again, Tim's video showed a lot about the campus. We have a sense of stewardship for the 565 acres of a National Historic Site there, which is right in Vancouver, or right in Victoria on Vancouver Island, and is a unique place that we want to protect. So, question that was asked earlier about our academic quality, and I want to come back about that because fundamentally the value of our academic education is measured by the students who apply, who succeed, who finish, and their sense of what the institution is about. And that's our primary determinant of what our quality is. But we use a business model because we are committed to this kind of, not entitlement, but providing service. So for example, we have a cost-effective business model which says that programs generate 50%, a 50% gross and a 15% net on each program that we propose. And that we have applied research which links to, is designed not traditional discovery research, but links to content in the classroom so that it can be connected and improve profession, if you like. This is a program, for example, that we developed with the Chinese government education district in Beijing. The Chaoyang School District is the embassy area of Beijing. They asked us to develop, to do a version of our master's degree in educational leadership and management for their emerging leaders. And so we applied our MA in educational leadership and management and designed a program that had our faculty teaching 6 months in Beijing. This is one of our core faculty members. Those students then, 22 students, came back to Victoria and spent 6 months in Victoria finishing their degree, and now we're going back and making a significant impact in their school district in China. So this is an example of that kind of responsiveness to our community. How are we unique? Again, the business model that we use, we We operate on our market responsiveness. I've talked about no sense of entitlement. If we start looking like other universities, I've suggested to the Deputy Minister they close us down, because they're very good universities in Victoria and in the Lower Mainland that we shouldn't start to look like. We have to be unique in terms of the model that we have. Our organization structure is designed to align and to drive success. We have a multi-year planning function. All of this, we do not a budget. Some of faculty and staff become quite frustrated when they come to railroads because they're used to a traditional institutional budget model, which is based on the assumption at the end of the, or at the beginning of the year, everybody's given a bucket of resources, and you get to spend and use that bucket, and if you kind of save some things at the end of the year, you get to keep part of that or all of that and use it for next year. We don't use a budget model or bucket model. We use an operations forecast. We say, based on what happened last year, we anticipate this is what we will need next year, but we're also going to invest in new programs in these areas, and we want to put new money in marketing, so let's allocate that. But no one gets a credit that they can draw upon at any point in time. The decisions are made as a planning document, not as an allocation document. One of my discoveries at the University of Regina, for example, in the traditional model is our CFO had assured the board that the year was going to be successful, that we planned to have a slight, moderate surplus of $300,000 at the end of the year. And the board meeting, 3 weeks before the year end, that was the statement. 6 weeks later, when we did the reconciliation, we discovered we were $2 million in debt. Just happened that a dean decided that the faculty needed more money and that they should be supporting that, and so they spent not only their bucket but everybody else's bucket. And traditionally, you don't have much choice over that. So we have a different model with respect to financial management in the alignment. And this whole idea of performance management is also a unique feature of Royal Roads. We have this 1-year operating plan, which leads into a 3-year business plan and a 5-year strategic directions document. A balance sheet, we can tell you on a monthly basis where our revenues are, where our expenditures are, and how they're tracking over year to year. And project them forward for the rest of the year, so we know at what point we need investments or what point we need to hold off on investments, etc. Quarterly forecasts that we report out to the board, etc. It's unique for a university to have that rigor of business model applied to its operation. We divide our business into 3 segments: our domestic, our international offshore, and our customized program, and we have those separate functions, and we apply them in all what we do. Our research is, as I said, is applied. We set revenue targets on enrollments, on our delivery mode, and our size of cohort, tuition, program mix. All of these, the cost of program delivery for each program. A unique feature that in our academic programming, when a new program is provided, faculty members also do a business case for that, and I'll come back and show you what that means. So that's you may not be able to see that at the back, but that's what our business model looks like at Royal Roads. We have 3 academic programs. We have marketing, recruitment, and business development, some of which you are as we speak. And it's an under-recognized function. All right? Is that okay, Catherine? And how research fits in. And then supporting that, we have a campus management, we have an academic support, an operational support, and what we call building capacity and engagement. So this is the business model of a university, our university. I I would challenge you to find another institution, university, post-secondary, that has a business model approach to its operation. So academic support, campus management, the building capacity, the bottom part of that, all of those things are part of our business operation, business model. Another feature, not only in terms of how we've talked about how we are unique in terms of our legislation, our purpose, how we are unique in terms of our business model that drives us. And the third area I would suggest how we are unique is in the way we do academic planning. So I've suggested it's demand driven rather than supply driven. We start with an opportunity. Some sort of idea comes up. However that's brought into the system. Sometimes we have a vibrant group of industry advisory councils for all of our programs. Those advisory councils meet 2 and 3 times a year for a day or two. Different programs have different kinds of expertise, but they're constantly monitoring the currency of our program. They're constantly monitoring the value of the education, the image in the marketplace, the changing demands of the marketplace and how it needs to come in. So those things all come in. An opportunity comes in and a simply couple-page brief concept and a champion is identified, and that goes into the executive immediately. And the executive will say, I don't see where this is coming from, it needs more work, or this is really the exciting thing, etc. In other words, there's an initial go or no go in a relatively short period of time. This can happen in a week, basically. If it's a go, then a more comprehensive process occurs. A market analysis, a financial risk, and a curriculum and program plan are done at the same time. So we may have a great idea, but if there's no market for that program, we're not going to do it. We need to know what's the value, what's the support for it, and then we do an allocation of financial and risk analysis, though that's an integral part of the planning process. Those 3 things come together in an integrated case, and it comes back to the executive then for, this looks like a comprehensive kind of process that we should do. Then we go into a curriculum committee, which is an academic group, faculty, as well as number 4, the academic council, which is to some degree an equivalent of a senate, but it's a body that reports to me as the president, and it is responsible for overseeing all of the academic programming. So if that's, and that can happen very quickly. That can happen within a month after that initial analysis of done of the market, the financial risk, and the curriculum development. Publicity can come out, detailed course outlines can be done, and it's approved then by the executive, followed by a program and research committee, which is a subcommittee of the Board of Governors. And that subcommittee has a collection of outside people. That is currently a former vice president of TELUS, a former president of the University of Winnipeg, and a former vice president of research at UBC are the external members of our program and research committee. Then goes to the Board of Governors for approval. At that point, because we have Royal Roads is one of only six universities in British Columbia authorized by the Degree Quality Assurance Board, which is the accreditation board of British Columbia. We are exempt from their formal review. After 10 years, actually 11 years, we were given an exemption from their formal approval process. And their formal approval process is typical for most quality assurance in that a new program would be subject to an external review body appointed by this group to come in and ascertain within the university whether the program should be authorized. In other words, typically an external group of faculty would come in, do an assessment of the demand, the quality of the program, the level of academic support, the level of library resources, the level of teaching facilities, etc. Go back and make a report to an independent body. This is the typical process for approval, and that could take 4 to 6 months depending on what's happened. We are exempt from that process, and so all we simply have to do is when our internal processes are finished, we post the program on the Degree Quality Assurance webpage for a month, and anybody, other institutions can comment and raise any concerns if they have anything, and then the minister makes an approval. So what that does is allow us to move fairly quickly. And in the case of the Masters of Global Management, for example, which is the first online or first full-time master's program, from idea to ministerial approval was 7 months. And that's pretty unique for a university to be able to launch a master's program in that short a period of time. But that's part of our model. We are responsible. That also means that we take off programs quickly. If the market isn't there, we will put a program on watch. We will look at it very carefully, and we'll pull a program if it's not meeting the targets and doesn't seem to be relevant. And we do that. It's not just adding. All right, well, how do we do? Clearly important to us. McLain's magazine does a ranking. You look in the first part of McLain's, you won't find us there because we're not a research-intensive university, nor are we a comprehensive university with engineering faculty and a science faculty, nor are we a primary undergraduate education program. And so the traditional categorization of McLain's, we don't fall in any of them. But McLain's for the last 3 years has added a separate section, which is the results of the NSSE, the National Survey of Student Engagement, which is an American survey at the undergraduate level, I point out. NSSE is an undergraduate measure. It comes from the US, and now it's mandatory for Ontario for all universities and colleges to participate in the NSSE survey, and Royal Roads participate. We participated in 2007 for the first time, and NSSE asks the students to respond to their institutions and categorizes the response in 6 different areas. 2 of those are important to our program. The first area is the level of academic rigor and academic challenge. The second was the level of active experimentation and relevancy of the education to the learning. And in both of those criteria, of the 60 universities that completed it in 2010, Royal Roads was #1. We were first in academic challenge of 60 universities and colleges in Canada, first in active and engaged learning of the 60 universities. Now, we didn't score so well on our student life campus component of that, I have to admit. We weren't there. And we were mid-range in terms of faculty-student interaction. It's an area that we want to improve at, absolutely. But in the 2 criteria that are most important to us, how relevant is the education and how rigorous is the academic quality, students say we're #1. This is the survey that was done by, I guess, the 23 Canadian universities participated in the this is at the graduate level, and universities included Alberta, Dalhousie, McGill, Queen's, Toronto, Western York, over 7,600 responses. So this is a survey done by graduate schools on the quality of the education. This was 2010. Overall quality of graduate education, top line is Royal Roads, bottom line is the norm for Canadian graduate schools. For excellent and very good, we're over 70%. And we have a few blue ones over there, a little poor, so we're not perfect. but we're significantly higher, by 11 or 12% higher than the average of other Canadian graduate schools. Overall experience at university, again, railroads at the top, we're at about 67%. The norm is about 58%. This is all on our web page. The relationship of program content to my research and professional goals, again, by graduate students. Again, we're over 72%, and the Canadian average of graduate schools is under 60%. Overall opportunities for student collaboration and teamwork. Tim gave you a suggestion that we do a lot of that. We're about 88% in either excellent or very good, and the average in Canada is under 70%. Helpfulness of staff members in my program. Another question about people asking, can I get information, can I get help, etc. We're really proud of this one. Again, over 75% of our students said we were excellent and or very good, and the norm is around 60%. So when we benchmark how well we do with other institutions, even though we're innovative, even though we do a portion of our program online, and even though we have prior learning assessment or flexible assessment, all of those things that some institutions think are questionable, we do well at it. Registrarial information technology, our students believe that we do an excellent job, and that's important to us in terms of where we're at. Some other successful kinds of thing. Well, indicators. We are the partnership, particularly that we have both with the Canadian government, more so with the British Columbia government, as now an institution that they rely on for innovative programs or responsiveness in terms of market. They come to us, whether that's on international programming or new initiatives, etc. We have 4,000 MBA graduates in China. We formed a partnership with an Australian company called Study Group. We'll be the Canadian partner, and that will allow international students to have English language training and academic pathway preparation for universities for our universities, for undergraduate program and graduate program. Tim told you we don't have year 1 and year 2 at the undergraduate level. We only have year 3 and year 4, degree completion. That makes it difficult for international students to come into our program. Most international students, when they sit down with their families and think about where they're going to go to school, don't say, well, I'm going to spend 2 years at York and then I'm going to transfer to Royal Roads and finish my last 2 years. So it's difficult. Often, international students kind of find us after the fact. But with the partnership and study group, which will start this fall, we will actually have students who will take our program and start in year 1 in a program designed by us, but taught by this Australian company. Just an example how we can be flexible and yet responsive. We have some interesting Aboriginal project. I was in Chile two weeks ago. We signed a contract with the indigenous organization in Chile, and you probably don't hear very much about some of the issues that Chile's having with the Mapuche, which is its Aboriginal community. But because it's unlike Bolivia or Peru or Ecuador or some of the other countries or Mexico, the portion of Aboriginal members of the community are quite small. Less than 10% of the Chilean population is Aboriginal. But this population of Aboriginal people is a group has declared war against the Chilean government. Another group of the Mapuche are on hunger strike against the Chilean government. Another group have put up barricades around roads, and there was a massive demonstration in the cathedral during Easter. So somewhat like what was happening in Canada and the US in the 70s and 80s is occurring there. And we've been asked as the institution to come and help them work with them on things like microloans, innovation projects to take some of their products and services and commercialize them, and to give them training on treaty negotiations and things that we do well. We have an interesting project that we do in a very remote community called the Yakuchi First Nations, which has about 350 people in a isolated northern British Columbia community. That average age or average education was 8th grade. No one had graduated from university in that community when we started. We established a learning community, which was really an internet resource and support person to help people in the community access information and bring it into their community as they defined it. One of the requirements of that project was that any of the young people who wanted to use the internet had to do an hour of community service for every hour of internet access that they had. And that was the payment. And one of the stories, successful stories that occurred was the person in the community who everybody feared, who was the biggest, kind of tough guy in the community, was really into rap music. And the only way he'd get access to rap music and support for his interest in rap music was volunteering in the community, which kind of ruined his image. But he liked that, and he's now our program assistant in that program, and we have the first undergraduate student from that community. So a program that takes our education and takes it back to the community, doesn't take the community out of it and tell them how to do it. It's that demand-based education model. Again, a very exciting learning innovation center that you will see, those of you that are going to come back to Railroads or start at Railroads. It is a teaching facility designed around our learning model. I have to say that castle and the grant building that was designed for it was designed for 250 Railroads military cadets, and we've had challenges running in our programs. Now we have a facility which is designed around the kind of learning model that we use, and it's a fabulous institution. And we started with with funding for a building for $24 million that we had funding for 15, and we ended up bringing it in on time and $4 million under budget, and managed to get another $5 million from the government. So it didn't cost us anything. Every 3 years, the Canadian government, tri-councils do an allocation of Canada Research Chairs, which is an indication, again, of how well universities do. They add up your numbers and divide them by whatever, and decide how many Canada Research Chairs. The number of Canada Research Chairs is 1,000, so it's a fixed number. And every year there'll be some who finish, and they do a reallocation. Well, this year we're the only institution that doubled our number of Canada Research Chairs. We went from 2 to 4. But again, it's an indication that our relevant and our applied research is recognized by the Canadian government. Showcasing of Railroads, we had a Conference Board of Canada presentation. There's a group called the Quality Network of Universities that met at Railroads in February, and the theme was on university education and where's it going. We actually had someone from the UK talking about the system and the collapsing system in the UK. The model that was used that came out of that was Railroads, and that graph that I used was presented by the Deputy Minister at that. When he was asked, so where's the solution? What do you see as the opportunity in the future? He said, well, you're experiencing that by being at Railroads. That's what we see as the solution. The same is true when the Association of Universities and Colleges of Canada met in Victoria 3 weeks ago. They spent a day at Railroads and got the same kind of response. Gwyn Morgan, who I said I would talk about, said, wrote an article, if universities were businesses, they'd be out of business. He's not terribly sympathetic about where universities are and feels that they're not preparing people that are connected to the workplace. He, however, thinks that Railroads is exactly on track and has visited a number of times and given speeches about that connection. So that relevancy or currency we think is appropriate. Well, I stopped because I wanted to. I probably gave you some indication of my excitement of being at Railroads, but I think this is more about your questions and your interests. So I wanted to highlight where I thought Railroads as an institution is a solution to a troubled system. And we're a solution because we approach education in a different way. It doesn't mean that we're right. It means that we're appropriate for the mandate that we've established. And I think where we're going, it gives us a model for other things that we can do. So I'd like to have a little discussion, some questions and comments. And there are people here who can give you some more information than I can. But anybody want to go ahead?
Has anybody ever done their management project on the
Business model?
well, the business model and/or the talent-based university?
Not that I am aware of, but that's an interesting project. Are you interested in coming?
Yes, I wrote it. It's a fascinating project.
You know, it's interesting because I strongly believe in using the place as part of the opportunity to learn. So what are we learning, and how can we learn from our own experiences and do analysis on that? So each of our vice presidents at various times have taken on projects from students in order to learn from the experience, etc. So it's very current and very relevant. We'd welcome that. That's what I'm saying. Yes. Which one? That one? That one? This is an interesting project. If last November we had an alumni event in China, and we had over 700 Chinese alumni. And the Chinese alumni, we've had a program in China for 10 years. We teach our MBA program there on alternative weekends. It's not delivered online. An issue in China in terms of online education. We have an office in Hong Kong that administers that. And we have associate faculty that teach it, and we supervise it in Hong Kong. And again, it's the same limitation, minimum of 7 years of work experience. It's team-based learning. It's an organizational consulting project that people have to take back in their community. For Chinese executives, this kind of a program was an incredible discovery. Their education, and most of them had very traditional education, which was a very didactic kind of flow. You sat in a class, professor taught, and you took notes, and your evaluation was based on your final exam and how well you did, and you were placed in universities on the basis of that. So crank that forward 10 or 15 years when they're working in businesses. Many of them, they owned themselves or were owned by foreign nationals. And they discover there's an education model in which they can learn from themselves that's relevant to their connection, that's team-based, etc. They become incredibly passionate and transformed in terms of their own learning experience. So the largest alumni group I've ever been to was 700 of our alumni in Zhuhai, which is right across from Hong Kong. And at one of the tables, they were arguing who was the wealthiest alumni in the room. The owner of the 5-star hotel that we were staying at and the 5 other hotels that he had in Guangdong province, or the other guy who had just listed his stock exchange his company on the Singapore Stock Exchange. These people have a transformational experience due to their education at Railroads, although they've never been at Railroads except at the end of graduation. We took some of our own alumni from Canada, from our BCom program, our MBA program, and our tourism program, just to be there, along with some of our fellows. And they were blown away about the capacity and level of expertise and level that this group of business people had. The Consul General, Canadian Consul General from Guangzhou said he'd never been in a room as the Canadian trade official or government official of such senior executives in his life since he'd been there. What came out of that was a request then to do a similar one this fall. This time invite a group of Canadian MBA and other executives to do a business-to-business dialogue. And so it will be held in the city of Zhuhai, which is next to the Macau. And the government has already of Macau, or the government of Zhuhai, and the state government has designed a day of networking with the Canadian students who will be there and the Chinese students who are Chinese alumni who will be there. And part of that, the alumni organization is organizing a day in which the Canadian students will all be brought into a Chinese home for lunch. That kind of connection, which is quite unusual to be brought into someone's home in China, is just an extension of that kind of networking that came out of that program, for example. So that's the business-to-business opportunity that will result in that. And it came from the event that happened last November. Does that answer your question? Pardon me? That's right. The reason that we were in China because the BC government decided that China was a strategic partner in the Asia-Pacific strategy, and so we moved very quickly to move into there. We're now looking, we have a program in Bangladesh. We're now looking at India. We've been to India a couple of times. We've signed a partnership there with Indira Gandhi National Open University, the largest university in the world, that we will do education training for them. This is a university that has 3.5 million students. We'll do education training of their teachers. I mean, that's just kind of throw that out, and it's a matter of scale. So we are starting to build those kinds of connections, but in a very strategic way. Other institutions kind of go every place and do everything. We're really focused on where it makes sense, where we develop partnerships. The issue in Chile was because they came to us having worked with some of our faculty before and staff before and asked us could we help them in this project around their Aboriginal population. Like driving or demand-based response is where we're at. Other questions or observations? I mean, it's convincing. I'm sure there's information more at the back of the table for anybody who wants to do it. I think I commend you for your interest. I hope that we can be responsive to your opportunity. I like the fact that we try to design a program which is relevant to people who are already working, to make it convenient to them so that the transition isn't that difficult. Once you're in the program, I assure you, you will work hard, you will do very well. We have a great track record of being able to determine how serious you really are in terms of your education and then work with you in figuring out how well to make that, how we can make that successful. So I look forward to meeting you. I try to meet most of the students as they come in on any of the programs. If you have any questions of me or my colleagues, please ask. Thank you very much.